What if everything you've been taught about money is wrong? What if the reason you work hard every single day is not to become free, but to stay trapped in a system that was never designed to make you rich? And what if the difference between those who struggle financially and those who achieve true wealth has nothing to do with how much they earn, but everything to do with how they think? Because from a young age, most people are taught to study hard, get a job, earn a paycheck, and play it safe. But no one teaches them how money actually works. No one teaches them how to make money work for them. And that is where the real divide begins, because the poor and middle class spend their lives working for money while the rich focus on building systems that make money work for them. And if you don't understand that difference, you will spend your entire life chasing income without ever achieving freedom, because income alone will never make you rich if your expenses grow with it. And that is exactly what happens to most people. They earn more, but they also spend more buying things they believe are assets when in reality they are liabilities, things that take money out of their pockets instead of putting money in. And this creates a cycle where they have to keep working harder just to maintain their lifestyle. A cycle of fear and desire where fear pushes them to seek security and desire pushes them to spend everything they earn. And this cycle is what keeps people stuck in the rat race, working for money instead of having money work for them. But what if you could break that cycle? Fine. What if you could step out of that pattern and start building something that gives you control over your time, your income, and your future? Because true financial freedom is not about having a lot of money. It is about having assets that generate income consistently, whether you work or not. And that begins with one simple but powerful shift in thinking. Stop asking, can I afford it? And start asking, how can I afford it? Because one shuts down your mind while the other forces it to grow. And growth is where opportunity lives. Because opportunities are everywhere, but most people are not trained to see them. They are too focused on security, too focused on playing it safe, too focused on what they have been told is the right path. And because of that, they miss the very chances that could change their lives. But those who learn to see differently, who develop financial intelligence, who understand how money flows and how to control it, begin to move in a completely different direction. They begin to build assets instead of liabilities. They begin to create multiple streams of income. Instead of relying on one paycheck, they begin to take calculated risks instead of avoiding them. And over time, those decisions compound, small actions repeated consistently, creating massive results. And this is where everything changes. Because now you are no longer dependent on your job. You are no longer limited by your time. You are building a system that supports you, a system that grows with you, a system that gives you freedom. And that freedom is not just financial, it is mental, it is emotional. It is the ability to choose how you live your life without being controlled by money. And this is the ultimate goal, not just to be rich, but to be free. Because money is not the goal, money is the tool. And once you learn how to use that tool effectively, once you understand how to make money work for you instead of you working for it, you step into a completely different world. A world where opportunities expand, where control increases, where your future is no longer determined by circumstances but by your decisions. And the only question left is this: are you going to keep doing what you've always been taught, or are you ready to learn what the rich teach their kids about money and finally take control of your financial life? It always begins with a simple question, a question most people ignore for their entire lives because it makes them uncomfortable, because it forces them to confront something they were never taught in school. And that question is this: why do some people work hard all their lives and still struggle financially while others who may not be smarter or more educated become wealthy and free? And the answer is not in how hard they work, it is in how they think about money, because money is not just something you earn. It is something you understand, and if you don't understand it, it will control your life no matter how much you make. And that is the difference I discovered early in my life when I realized I had two fathers, one rich and one poor, both strong, both intelligent, both hardworking. Yet their financial lives could not have been more different, and that contrast forced me to think in a way most people never do. It forced me to question everything I was taught about money. Because one father would say, study hard, get a good job, and play it safe, while the other would say, learn how money works and make it work for you. And right there, you see the first divide. The poor and middle class work for money, while the rich have money work for them. And that single idea, if you truly understand it, can change your entire life because most people spend their lives chasing paychecks, believing that more money will solve their problems. But it never does. Because the problem is not income, the problem is mindset, the problem is financial education. The problem is that from a young age, we are programmed to think like employees instead of owners, and that programming becomes a trap, a cycle of fear and desire, where fear pushes you to work for security, and desire pushes you to spend everything you earn, and that cycle repeats over and over again, creating what I call the rat race, where people wake up, go to work, pay bills, and repeat that pattern for decades without ever asking if there is another way. And the truth is, there is another way. But it requires you to think differently. It requires you to stop saying, I can't afford it, and start asking, how can I afford it? Because one shuts down your mind while the other forces it to grow. And that is where wealth begins, not in your bank account, but in your thinking, because your mind is your greatest asset. And if you train it to see opportunities instead of obstacles, you begin to move in a completely different direction from everyone else. And this is where financial freedom starts to take shape, because freedom is not about having more money. It is about having control over your time, your decisions, and your life. And that control comes from assets, not income, because income alone will never make you rich if your expenses rise with it. And that is exactly what happens to most people. They earn more, but they also spend more buying liabilities. They believe are assets like bigger houses, nicer cars, and expensive lifestyles, and then they wonder why they are still stuck financially, because they were never taught the difference between assets and liabilities. And this is one of the most important principles. You must understand assets put money in your pocket. Liabilities take money out of your pocket. And the rich focus on building assets while the poor and middle class focus on increasing income and spending it. And that is why the gap continues to grow, because the game they are playing is completely different. And once you see this, you cannot unsee it. You begin to realize that working harder is not the answer. Learning is the answer. Understanding is the answer. Building and the answer. And that is why I always say financial education is more powerful than money itself, because money comes and goes. But if you understand how money works, you can always create more. And that is the real power, not just earning, but creating, not just saving, but multiplying, not just surviving, but expanding. And this is where your life begins to change, because now you are no longer dependent on a paycheck. You are building systems. You are creating streams of income. You are using money to generate more money. And that is when you step out of the rat race and into financial independence. And it does not happen overnight. It requires discipline. It requires patience. It requires a willingness to think differently from the crowd, because the crowd will always tell you to play it safe, to avoid risk, to stay comfortable. But comfort is what keeps people stuck, and risk, properly understood and managed, is what creates opportunity and growth. And this is another principle the rich understand. They don't avoid risk, they learn how to manage it, because the greatest risk of all is not taking any risk at all and staying in a system that was never designed to make you free. And once you accept that, once you see that clearly, you begin to make different decisions. You begin to invest in yourself and your knowledge and your skills and your ability to see and create opportunities. And that is when your financial life starts to shift, not because of luck, but because of awareness. Because now you are no longer reacting to money, you are controlling it. You are controlling it. Directing it, you are making it work for you. And that is the ultimate goal. Not just to have money, but to have money working for you consistently, reliably, and intelligently, so that you are free to live life on your terms. And that is the journey. You are about to take a journey from confusion to clarity, from dependency to control, from working for money to having money work for you. If you are willing to question what you have been taught, to challenge your beliefs, and to learn what most people ignore, then everything can change. Because the difference between being broke and being rich is not just money, it is mindset. It is education, it is action, and once you align those three things, there is no limit to what you can build, and no limit to the freedom you can create for yourself and for your future. Wow. The moment you begin to understand that money is not the problem, but your relationship with money is the real issue, everything starts to shift, because most people spend their lives trying to earn more without ever questioning why they keep losing it. And this is where the second lesson begins. Because it is not enough to simply make money. You must understand how money flows, how it moves, and most importantly, why it escapes from those who don't understand it. And I learned this not from school, not from textbooks, but from watching two very different ways of thinking play out in real life. Because one father earned a lot but always seemed to struggle, while the other built wealth quietly and consistently. And the difference was not income. It was understanding, because one focused on earning while the other focused on learning. And that distinction changes everything. Because if you only focus on earning, you will always depend on effort. But if you focus on learning, you begin to build systems that generate income beyond your effort. And that is where true financial intelligence begins, because financial intelligence is not about numbers. It is about patterns. It is about recognizing where money comes from, where it goes, and how to redirect it in your favor. And most people never develop this intelligence because they are never taught to look at money this way. Instead, they are taught to work hard, save money, and avoid risk. But what they are not taught is that saving alone will not make them rich, because inflation eats away at savings, taxes reduce income, and expenses grow over time. And without understanding how to make money grow, you remain stuck no matter how much you earn. And this is why I always emphasize one critical principle that the rich understand deeply and the poor and middle class often ignore. And that principle is this: assets put money in your pocket and liabilities take money out of your pocket. And if you can truly understand this at a deep level, you begin to see the world differently, because suddenly you realize that many of the things people believe make them rich are actually keeping them poor, because they buy liabilities thinking they are assets. They buy bigger houses, expensive cars, and luxury items believing these are signs of wealth, when in reality they are obligations that require continued. They have to work harder just to maintain their lifestyle, and the harder they work, the more they earn, and the more they earn, the more they spend, and the cycle continues. And this is the trap that keeps people in the rat race, because they are not building assets. They are accumulating liabilities disguised as success. And this is where the rich think differently, because instead of focusing on what they can buy, they focus on what they can build. They focus on acquiring assets that generate income, whether it is businesses, investments, real estate, or intellectual property. They focus on things that put money into their pockets consistently, and over time those assets begin to grow and compound, creating a foundation of financial stability and eventually financial freedom. And this is not about luck. This is about understanding, because once you understand the difference between assets and liabilities, you begin to make decisions differently. You begin to ask better questions. You begin to see opportunities where others see expenses. And this shift in thinking is what separates those who struggle from those who succeed financially, because success with money is not about how much you earn. It is about how much you keep and how effectively you use it. And this brings us to another powerful principle that you must understand if you want to move forward financially, and that is the importance of minding your own business. And this does not mean ignoring others. It means focusing on building your own asset column instead of spending your life building someone else's. Because when you work for a company, you are helping them grow their assets, while your own financial position depends on your paycheck. And if that paycheck stops, your income stops. And that is a fragile position to be in, because it places your financial future in someone else's hands. And this is why it is essential to start building your own assets even while you are working, because financial security does not come from a job. It comes from ownership. It comes from having something that generates income independently of your time and effort. And this is where many people hesitate, because they fear risk, they fear failure, they fear stepping outside of what is familiar. But what they do not realize is that staying in the same place carries its own risk, a much greater risk, because it limits your growth and keeps you dependent on a system that was never designed to make you financially free. And this is why financial education is so critical, because it gives you the tools to evaluate risk intelligently rather than avoiding it blindly. It allows you to see opportunities clearly rather than missing them entirely, and it empowers you to make decisions based on knowledge rather than fear. And when you reach this level of understanding, something remarkable begins to happen. Your confidence grows not because you know everything, but because you understand how to learn and adapt. And this ability to learn is what gives you an advantage because the world of money is constantly changing. New opportunities emerge, new systems develop, and those who are willing to learn and evolve are the ones who stay ahead while others fall behind. And this is why I always say that your greatest asset is not your house, not your car, not even your investments. Your greatest asset is your mind because it is your mind that creates everything else. And if you invest in your mind, if you develop your financial intelligence, if you train yourself to see opportunities and take action, then you are no longer limited by your current situation. You are no longer defined by your income or your job. You become someone who can create value, who can build assets, who can generate income. And that is the foundation of true financial freedom, because freedom is not about having a certain amount of money. It is about having the ability to create money when you need it and to sustain that ability over time. And this is the path that few people choose because it requires effort, it requires discipline. It requires a willingness to think differently and act differently. But for those who do choose it, the rewards are not just financial, they are transformational because you move from a state of dependency to a state of control, from a life of limitation to a life of possibility. And once you experience that shift, once you begin to see the results of your new way of thinking, there is no going back because you realize that the only thing that was ever holding you back was not your circumstances, not your background, not even your income, but your understanding. And now that understanding is expanding, and with it, your potential expands as well. And this is only the beginning because as you continue to learn and apply these principles, you will begin to uncover deeper levels of financial intelligence, deeper strategies for building wealth, and greater opportunities for creating the life you truly want. And that is where the journey becomes even more powerful because now you are not just learning about money, you are mastering it. And in doing so, you are mastering your future. As you continue this journey, something begins to change inside you, something subtle but powerful, because now you are no longer just looking at money as something you earn and spend. You are beginning to see it as a system, a language, a game that very few people truly understand. And once you start to see it that way, you realize why so many people struggle financially, even if they are intelligent, educated, and hardworking. Because they were never taught the rules of this game, they were only taught how to participate in it as employees, not how to win it as owners. And that realization alone can completely shift the direction of your life, because now you begin to ask different questions. Not just how much can I earn, but how can I make money work for me? Not just how can I save, but how can I multiply? Not just how can I be secure, but how can I be free? And these questions lead you to one of the most powerful lessons I learned, a lesson that most people avoid because it challenges everything they have been taught about safety and stability. And that lesson is this: you must mind your own business. And this does not mean ignoring your job or your responsibilities. It means understanding that your job is not your business. Your job is what you do to generate income, but your business is what you build to create wealth, and most people confuse the two. They spend their entire lives working for someone else's business while neglecting to build their own. And then they wonder why they never achieve financial freedom, because they have been focusing on the wrong thing. They have been focusing on earning instead of building. And building is what creates long-term wealth, because when you build assets, you create something that continues to produce income even when you are not working. And that is the key difference between those who are financially free and those who are not. One group works for money while the other has money working for them, and this is where your mindset must evolve again. Because now it is not just about understanding assets and liabilities. It is about taking action to build your asset column consistently and intentionally, because knowledge without action changes nothing, and most people remain stuck not because they lack information, but because they fail to apply it. They wait for the perfect time, the perfect opportunity, the perfect conditions, but those conditions rarely come, and even if they do, most people are not prepared to take advantage of them because they have not developed the habits and discipline required to succeed. And this is why I always emphasize starting small, but starting now, because the size of your first investment does not matter. What matters is the habit of investing. What matters is the discipline of building. What matters is the mindset of ownership, because once you begin to see yourself as an owner rather than an employee, everything changes: your decisions, change your priorities, change your behavior changes, because now you are thinking long term, you are thinking strategically, you are thinking about how each action contributes to your financial future. And this is where another important principle comes into play. The principle of understanding the difference between working for money and having money work for you. Because when you work for money, you are trading your time for income, and time is limited, which means your income is limited. But when money works for you, your income is no longer tied directly to your time. It becomes scalable, it becomes expandable, it grows beyond your personal effort. And that is where true wealth is created, because wealth is not about how hard you work. It is about how effectively your money works for you, and this requires a different set of skills, a different way of thinking, a different level of financial education. Because now you are dealing with investments, businesses, assets, and opportunities that require analysis, decision making, and risk management. And this is where today many people hesitate because they fear making mistakes, they fear losing money, they fear stepping into the unknown, but what they do not realize is that mistakes are part of the process, that losses are lessons, that failure is feedback, and those who are willing to learn from their mistakes are the ones who eventually succeed, because they develop experience, they develop insight, they develop the ability to make better decisions over time. And this is why I always say that financial intelligence is not built in a classroom. It is built in the real world through experience, through action, through action, through action. Learning from both successes and failures, and as you continue on this path, you begin to see opportunities that others overlook. You begin to recognize patterns that others ignore. You begin to understand how money moves and how you can position yourself to benefit from that movement. And this is where your confidence begins to grow, not because you know everything, but because you know how to learn, you know how to adapt, you know how to respond to changes. And this adaptability is one of the most valuable traits you can develop, because the world of money is constantly evolving. New technologies, new markets, new opportunities are emerging all the time. And those who are flexible, who are willing to learn, who are willing to take calculated risks, are the ones who thrive, while others remain stuck in outdated ways of thinking. And this is where you must make another decision, a deeper decision about who you want to become, because becoming financially free is not just about acquiring assets. It is about becoming the kind of person who can create and manage those assets. It is about developing the discipline, the knowledge, the mindset, and the habits that support long-term success, because without those qualities, even if you acquire wealth, you may not be able to keep it. And this is something I have seen happen time and time again. People who come into money quickly, but lose it just as quickly because they never developed the financial intelligence required to sustain it. And that is why this journey is so important, because it is not just about money. It is about transformation. It is about becoming someone who understands money, who controls money, who uses money as a tool rather than being controlled by it. And once you reach that level, everything changes. Your perspective changes, your opportunities expand, your confidence grows, and your life begins to move in a completely different direction. And this is only the third step in the journey, because as you continue forward, you will begin to uncover even deeper principles, even more advanced strategies, and even greater opportunities for building wealth and achieving financial freedom. And each step will challenge you, each step will push you to think differently, act differently, and grow beyond your current limitations. But if you are willing to continue, if you are willing to learn and apply these lessons, then there is no limit to what you can achieve, because the path to financial freedom is not reserved for a select few. It is available to anyone who is willing to understand the rules of the game and play it at a higher level than everyone else. As you move deeper into understanding how money truly works, you begin to realize that the biggest obstacle was never the lack of opportunity. It was fear, because fear controls most financial decisions, whether people admit it or not. Fear of losing money, fear of making mistakes, fear of what others will think. And because of that fear, most people stay exactly where they are, doing what feels safe instead of doing what creates growth. And this is where one of the most important lessons comes into play. A lesson that separates those who remain stuck from those who move forward. And that lesson is this: the rich do not let fear control their decisions. They learn to manage it, they understand it, and they use it as a signal rather than a stop sign. Because fear often appears at the edge of opportunity, and if you turn away every time you feel it, you will miss the very chances that could change your life. And I saw this clearly growing up because one father would always say, play it safe, don't take risks, don't lose what you have, while the other would say, learn to take risks, intelligently learn to manage them, learn to turn them into opportunities, and that difference in thinking leads to completely different outcomes over time because avoiding risk may keep you safe in the short term, but it also keeps you small in the long term, while learning to manage risk opens the door to growth, to expansion, to financial freedom. And this is why I always emphasize that the greatest risk of all is not taking any risk, because if you spend your entire life trying to avoid failure, you will also avoid success. And this is something that must be understood deeply, because the path to wealth is not a straight line. It is filled with uncertainty. It is filled with challenges. It is filled with moments where you will question your decisions, but those moments are part of the process. They are not signs that you should stop. They are signs that you are moving beyond your comfort zone and into a space where growth happens. And this is where courage becomes essential, not the absence of fear, but the ability to act. Despite it, because action is what creates results, not thinking, not planning, not waiting, but doing. And this brings us to another critical principle that you must understand if you want to move forward financially, and that is the power of learning through doing. Because many people spend years studying, reading, analyzing, but never actually take action, and as a result, they remain in the same place because knowledge without application has no value. It is only when you take what you learn and apply it in the real world that it begins to transform your life. And this is why I always say that financial education is a lifelong process. It does not end when you read a book or attend a seminar. It continues as you invest, as you build, as you make decisions, and learn from the outcomes. And over time, this process builds confidence. It builds experience. It builds the ability to navigate the complexities of money with greater clarity and precision. And this is where another shift begins to occur, because now you are no longer just reacting to financial situations. You are anticipating them. You are preparing for them. You are positioning yourself to take advantage of them. And this level of awareness gives you an edge because you are no longer operating blindly. You are making informed decisions based on understanding rather than emotion. And this is crucial because emotions can be dangerous when it comes to money. Fear can cause you to miss opportunities. Greed can cause you to take unnecessary risks. And impatience can lead to poor decisions. And that is why discipline is so important, because discipline allows you to act based on strategy rather than emotion. It allows you to stay focused on your long-term goals rather than being distracted by short-term fluctuations. And this is where the rich truly separate themselves, because they have the discipline to stick to their plans, to continue building their assets, to continue learning and growing even when it is difficult, even when it is uncomfortable. And that consistency is what creates results over time, because wealth is not built overnight. It is built through consistent action, through smart decisions, through the compounding effect of time and effort. And this is another principle. You must understand the power of compounding, because small, consistent actions can lead to massive results over time, whether it is investing money, building a business, or developing skills. The key is consistency allows growth to accumulate and accelerate. And this is why patience is so important, because many people give up too soon. They expect immediate results. They expect quick returns. And when they do not see them, they lose motivation and stop. But those who succeed understand that building wealth takes time. It requires persistence. It requires a long-term perspective. And this is where your mindset must evolve once again, because you must begin to think not in terms of days or months, but in terms of years and decades. You must begin to see your financial journey as a process rather than an event. And when you adopt this perspective, everything changes, because now you are no longer discouraged by short-term setbacks. You see them as part of the bigger picture. You understand that each step, each decision, each action is contributing to your overall progress. And this understanding gives you resilience. It allows you to keep moving forward even when things are not going as planned. And this resilience is one of the most valuable qualities you can develop, because the path to financial freedom is not always easy. It requires effort. It requires sacrifice. It requires the willingness to learn and adapt continuously. But for those who are willing to stay the course, the rewards are significant, not just in terms of money, but in terms of freedom, in terms of control, in terms of the ability to live life on your own terms. And that is ultimately what this journey is about. Not just accumulating wealth, but creating a life of choice, a life where you are not limited by financial constraints, where you have the ability to pursue your passions, to spend time with the people you care about, to make decisions based on what you want rather than what you have to do. And that level of freedom is available to anyone who is willing to understand the principles of money and apply them consistently. And as you continue on this path, you will begin to see that the barriers that once seemed so large were actually created by your own beliefs, by your own fears, by your own lack of understanding. And as those barriers fall away, your potential expands, and with it, your ability to create the life you truly desire. And this is the transformation that financial education brings, not just a change in income, but a change in mindset, a change in perspective, a change in the way you see the world and your place in it. And once that change occurs, there is no going back, because you begin to realize that the power to create your future has always been in your hands, and now you have the knowledge and the awareness to use it effectively. And that is where the real journey begins, because from this point forward, you are no longer just learning about money. You are mastering it step by step, decision by decision, action by action, building a future that is not defined by limitations, but by possibilities. As you continue forward, there comes a point where knowledge alone is no longer enough, and action alone is no longer enough, and even discipline alone is no longer enough, because now you are stepping into a level where everything must work together: your mindset, your habits, your decisions, your environment, and most importantly, your ability to see what others cannot see, because at this stage, the difference between those who achieve financial freedom and those who remain stuck is no longer information. It is awareness. It is the ability to recognize opportunities in places where others only see problems. And this is exactly what I began to understand as I learned from my rich dad, because he did not just teach me how to make money, he taught me how to see money differently. He taught me that opportunities are everywhere, but most people are not trained to see them because they are too focused on security, too focused on stability, too focused on what they have been told is the safe path. And because of that, they miss the very opportunities that could change their lives. And this is why I always say that one of the most powerful assets you can develop is your ability to see what others cannot, because once you develop that ability, you are no longer limited by what is obvious. You begin to notice patterns, trends, shifts in the market, changes in behavior, and these insights allow you to position yourself ahead of the curve rather than reacting after the fact. And this is where a true wealth is often created, not by following the crowd, but by seeing what the crowd has not yet recognized and having the courage to act on it before it becomes obvious to everyone else. And this requires a combination of financial intelligence and emotional control, because seeing an opportunity is as one thing, but acting on it requires confidence. It requires discipline. It requires the ability to move forward even when there is uncertainty. And this is where many people hesitate, because they are waiting for certainty. They are waiting for guarantees. They are waiting for proof that something will work before they take action. But the reality is that certainty rarely exists in the world of money, and those who wait for it often miss the opportunity entirely, while those who are willing to act with calculated risk are the ones who benefit the most. And this is another key principle that must be understood deeply: the difference between gambling and investing, because many people confuse the two. They think that taking any risk is dangerous. But the truth is that risk is not the problem. Lack of knowledge is the problem, because when you invest without understanding, you are gambling. But when you invest with knowledge, with analysis, with strategy, you are managing risk. You are positioning yourself intelligently, and this is what separates the rich from everyone else. They do not avoid risk. They learn how to evaluate it. They learn how to reduce it. They learn how to turn it into opportunity to opportunity. And this is where your financial education continues to evolve, because now you are not just learning basic principles. You are developing the ability to analyze deals, to understand numbers, to evaluate potential outcomes, and make decisions based on logic rather than emotion. And this is where the concept of making money work for you becomes even more powerful, because now you are not just building assets, you are optimizing them. You are improving their performance. You are increasing their returns, and over time, this creates a compounding effect that accelerates your financial growth. And this is why I always emphasize the importance of taking action early, because the earlier you start, the more time you have for compounding to work in your favor. And compounding is one of the most powerful forces in wealth creation, because it allows small, consistent investments to grow into significant amounts over time. And this is something that many people underestimate because they are focused on immediate results. They want quick gain. They want fast success. But true wealth is built slowly, steadily, and consistently through disciplined action. And this is where patience becomes a critical factor, because without patience, you are more likely to make impulsive decisions, to chase trends, to take unnecessary risks. And those decisions can set you back significantly, while those who are patient, who stay focused on their long-term strategy, who continue to build and grow their assets consistently, are the ones who achieve lasting success. And this is where another important lesson comes into play, the lesson of controlling your expenses. Because no matter how much you earn or how much your investments grow, if your expenses grow at the same rate, you will never achieve true financial freedom. And this is why the rich focus not just on increasing income, but on managing expenses intelligently. They understand that every dollar saved, and that every dollar saved invested, is a dollar that can work for them in the future. And this disciplined approach to spending and investing is what allows them to build wealth over time, while others remain trapped in a cycle of earning and spending. And this is where your lifestyle choices become critically important, because your lifestyle determines your financial trajectory. And if you choose a lifestyle that prioritizes consumption over investment, you will always be working to support that lifestyle. But if you choose a lifestyle that prioritizes growth and asset building, you create a foundation for long-term wealth. And this does not mean you cannot enjoy your life. It means you must be intentional about your choices. You must understand the trade-offs. You must decide what is truly important to you and align your financial decisions with those priorities. And this level of awareness gives you control, because now or out, you are not reacting to your circumstances. You are shaping them. You are making decisions based on your goals rather than your impulses. And this is where financial freedom begins to feel real, because you can see the progress. You can see your assets growing. You can see your income streams expanding. And you begin to realize that you are no longer dependent on a single source of income. You are building a system that supports you. And this system is what provides security, not a job, not a paycheck, but a network of assets that generate income consistently and reliably. And this is where your confidence grows even further, because now you have proof, you have evidence that your approach is working, and this reinforces your commitment. It strengthens your discipline. It encourages you to continue learning and growing. And this is how momentum builds, because success creates confidence. And confidence leads to more action, and more action leads to greater results. And over time, this cycle accelerates your progress and moves you closer to your ultimate goal, which is not just financial success, but financial independence by money. And this is the point where everything comes together, where your mindset, your education, your actions, and your discipline align to create a life of freedom and possibility. And as you approach this stage, you begin to understand that the journey was never just about money. It was about becoming the kind of person who can create and sustain wealth, because once you become that person, there is no limit to what you can achieve and no limit to the impact you can have. And that is the true power of financial education. Not just the ability to make money, but the ability to create a life of choice, a life of control, a life where you are no longer driven by fear or limitation, but by vision and opportunity. And that is what separates those who dream about financial freedom from those who actually achieve it. Because at the end of the day, it is not about what you know, it is about what you do. It is about what you do with what you know and how consistently you apply it over time, building step by step, decision by decision, a future that defined not by chance but by design. And now you arrive at the final realization, the point where everything you have learned begins to connect, not as separate ideas, but as a complete system, because financial freedom is not one decision, not one investment, not one opportunity. It is the result of a way of thinking, a way of acting, and a way of living that you build over time. And this is where most people either transform completely or fall back into old patterns, because understanding these principles is one thing, but living them every single day is something entirely different. And this is where the real challenge begins, because now it is no longer about learning what to do. It is about becoming the kind of person who does it consistently, without hesitation, without excuses, without distraction, because consistency is what turns knowledge into results and results into free. And as you reach this stage, you begin to see something very clearly, something that was always there, but you could not recognize before, and that is this: money is not the goal. Freedom is the goal. Money is simply the tool. And if you focus only on the tool, you will always feel like something is missing. But if you focus on what the tool allows you to create, control, and experience, then everything changes. Because now your actions are driven by purpose rather than pressure, by vision rather than fear. And this is where the mindset of the rich becomes fully clear, because they do not work for money. They build systems that generate money. They do not chase income, they create assets. They do not rely on one source, they develop multiple streams. And this diversification is what gives them stability and power, because now they are not dependent on any single situation or opportunity. They have built a structure that supports them regardless of changes in the economy or environment. And this is one of the most important financial principles you must understand if you want to maintain and grow your wealth. Never rely on a single source of income. Always build multiple streams that can support you and grow over time, because this creates resilience, and most importantly, it creates freedom. And as you begin to implement this principle, you will notice another shift. Your focus moves from short-term gains to long-term growth, from immediate rewards to sustainable results. And this is where patience and discipline continue to play a critical role, because building multiple income streams takes time. It requires effort. It requires learning and adaptation. But the results are worth it, because once those streams are established, they begin to work for you consistently. This is where you truly begin to experience what it means to have money working for you, because now your income is not tied to your time, your earnings are not limited by your hours, and your opportunities are no longer restricted by your current situation. And this is where true financial independence begins to take shape, because independence is not just about having enough money. It is about having enough control over your income and your time to live life on your own terms. And this level of control allows you to make decisions based on what you want rather than what you need to do. And that powerful shift, because now you are no longer driven by necessity, you are driven by choice. And this is what creates a life of fulfillment, a life where you can pursue your passions, spend time with the people you care about, and contribute in meaningful ways without being constrained by financial limitations. And this is the ultimate goal, not just to be rich, but to be free. And as you move into this stage, you begin to understand another important truth: that wealth is not just about money. It is about knowledge, it is about relationships, it is about experiences, and it is about the impact you create, because money alone cannot provide fulfillment. It is how you use that money, how you apply your knowledge, and how you contribute to others that gives your life meaning. And this is where your journey evolves once again, because now you are not just focused on building wealth for yourself. You begin to think about how you can use that wealth to create opportunities for others, to support your family, to invest in your community, and leave a legacy that extends beyond your own lifetime. And this is where the concept of legacy becomes important, because true wealth is not measured by what you accumulate, but by what you create and sustain over time. And this requires a long-term perspective. It requires you to think beyond immediate gains and consider the lasting impact of your decisions. And this is why financial education should never stop, because the world continues to change, opportunities continue to evolve, and those who remain committed to learning and growing are the ones who continue to thrive. And this is the final principle I want to leave you with: the commitment to continuous growth, because no matter how much you achieve, no matter how far you go, There is always more to learn. There is always another level to reach, and those who embrace this mindset are the ones who remain successful, not just for a moment, but for a lifetime. And as you reflect on everything you have learned, from understanding the difference between assets and liabilities, to building your own business, to managing risk, to recognizing opportunities, to developing discipline and patience, you begin to see that this journey has transformed you, not just financially, but mentally and emotionally, because you are no longer the same person you were when you started. You think differently, you act differently, you see the world differently, and that transformation is the most valuable outcome of all. Because once you change the way you think, change the way you live, and once you change the way you live, you change your future. And that is the true power of these lessons, because they do not just give you the ability to make money. They give you the ability to create a life of freedom, of purpose, and of impact. And now the choice is yours. Whether you will take these principles and apply them consistently, whether you will continue to learn and grow, whether you will step fully into this new way of thinking and build the life you truly want. Because everything you need is already within your reach: the knowledge, the tools, opportunities. All that remains is your decision to act, to commit, and to follow through. Because at the end of the day, financial freedom is not something you are given. It is something you create. And once you make that decision, once you commit to that path, there is nothing that can stop you from, well, now can stop you achieving it, because you are no longer guided by fear or limitation. You are guided by understanding, by discipline, and by a clear vision of the life you are building. And that is where your true journey begins. Not as someone chasing money, but as someone who has mastered it and uses it as a tool to create a life that is truly your own.